A very warm welcome. Today we're talking transformation. Obviously the Boks have now been selected and the final 31-man squad is heading off to the World Cup. Now joining me in studio is Tabiso Mosia, and of course we've got Tsimba on Skype. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's a hotly debated topic, so let's get right to it. Tabiso, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on the 9 players that have been selected?
Well, I think what we need to understand is that the number 9 was the minimum requirement for Coach Hanneke Meyer as far as the numbers are concerned in his World Cup selection. Because according to SARU's transformation policy, which is in black and white, is that there have to be 30% representation basically, and 9 out of 31 is basically that 30%. So he's just made it Hanneke Meyer. Before in the Rugby Championship, he failed to meet those quota systems. Even in his matchday squads of 23, where he had to choose 7 players of color, he failed to do that too. But it's a surprise. As much as there are 9 players of color, but you don't want players to be picked just because they are black. You don't want players to be picked to go carry bags at the World Cup and not play any matches at all. And I fear that this situation might play itself out in the UK when the Boks are at the World Cup. Because if you look at a player like Rudy Page, with all due respect to Rudy Page, is a fantastic player, played very well in Super Rugby with Handré Pollard, you know, that Bulls pairing. But he never played, he's never played a test match for the Springboks. He's never played under Hanneke Meyer, who's picked him, but he's never played him, he's never made the bench. And a guy like Cobus Reinach was ahead of him in the selection line, and it's really, really a tragedy that a guy like Cobus Reinach is not making it to the World Cup. And I think that we need to be blunt and to be honest, that transformation is not about picking players of color just for the sake of it. It's about picking players that can play and that can be fielded. And I think that as good a player as Rudy Page is, but there are guys that were ahead of him in the pack. Guys like even Faf de Klerk should have a fair shot of being at the World Cup. So I think the pressure that Hanneke Meyer has been put under in the past few weeks has actually resulted in these black players, in this increased number of black players in the Springbok squad.
Now, I want to talk to you about that a little bit more, but for our viewers, just a note, you can give us a call on 011 542 2186. And remember, it's 011 542 2186. Now, obviously, you've talked about the fact that, you know, it seems like it's almost a reaction to the issue with Kasatu and, you know, them sort of putting the nail on his head. When we look at the teams, and for my understanding, is some of these players were picked there on merit. Some players have warranted a call, and like you said, Rudy Page hasn't played any game. He hasn't even had a taste. So what is the significance of taking him to the World Cup?
I think the problem here is that Coach Hanneke Meyer has left this transformation selections up until too late, and now he has no choice but to make up the numbers, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in. The problem with the Coach Hanneke Meyer, it's not it's that the criticism comes from the fact that some of the black players have been picked before by the coach, but they've never been given game time. They've never been backed. I mean, a guy like Siya Kolisi is going to the World Cup, and rightly so, but Siya Kolisi made his debut in 2012 and he's only played about 11 or 12 tests for the Springboks. You know, a guy like Skaran Tubeni, there's a fair call for Skaran Tubeni to be at the World Cup. Lionel Mapua and even Elton Yanchis should go there on merit, not because they're black, but on merit. But the problem is that this coach in the past 4 years, he's failed to back the black talent, but he has backed their white counterparts. You know, he's backed guys like Marcel Coutier, the youngsters, guys like Peter Steph Dutoit, like Eben Etzebeth have been backed, Handré Pollard have been backed, Jesse Creel, you know, Damien Dialend, all these youngsters that are the same age as Siya Kolisi, the same age as Skaran Tubeni, they've been given better opportunities in the Springbok setup, and that's why we find ourselves in the situation that we are in now. You saw recently in the Rugby Championship, a guy like Lwazi Mvovo, he had to watch Jesse Creel go play in his position, and until after the pressure came, you know, that's when Lwazi was picked against Argentina and he scored a try. A guy like Sibora Sitwale was fantastic for the Sharks under Jake White. He could play in center where they say black players cannot play, you know, but we don't see him around anymore. So I think the problem is that the coach has left this up until too late, and I think it's actually probably an insult to transformation, you know, to hear that Damien Dialend is being regarded as a player of color, you know, because if you have a situation like that, then you're going to have a Dimitri Katrakelis being seen as a player of color, you know. So I think we need to understand what transformation is all about. As much as we're talking about the Springboks here, transformation is not about the Springboks, you know. Transformation starts at the bottom. Transformation is about creating equal opportunities for everybody. creating facilities in the townships so that those boys can actually have a fair chance to compete with their white counterparts. We need to move away from this thing, Pashka, of having the top black talent moving away from the township and going to the so-called white schools. Because if we've got 15 black players from a high school like in Zondelelo in the Eastern Cape, only 2 of them will be taken by the so-called white schools. What happened to the other 13? So I think our government also needs to come to the party here and start changing the whole focus and start building facilities in the township and start backing those black schools that play rugby in the township, because there are a lot of those, but they need financial backing, they need facilities backing so that we can actually develop our own talent, because it takes a lot for a black kid to go to a foreign environment and to go and prove himself there. So I think that's what we need to start talking about. Start talking about facilities, start talking about transformation in administration, because even the coaches, if you look at the coaches are all white, you know? So that's what we need to start talking about, not only the Springboks.
Well, it's quite a heated topic, and of course we've got Kennedy and Tsimba on Skype. Kennedy, your thoughts on what Tabiso has said here in studio. Obviously, it's been a heated topic over a number of years, and I think it's now really, the COSATU issue has really been the catalyst for people starting to voice their opinion about it.
Yes, I would like to say I would agree with everything that was said. I think he hit all the right nails on the head. It's an issue that needs to be dealt with over time. You can't deal with it once World Cup time comes. You know, you've got to address right from the grassroots, right from the referees, right from the coaches, and all the players. There's so many players playing at school level, but we never see them coming through to the senior level, and those need to be addressed before, you know, we can just pinpoint before World Cup to try to fix selections. You know, every World Cup team has had selection, you know, disappointments and that kind of stuff. But I think with us, it's just that our players haven't been given a chance to play, and they've had 2 or 3 years to prepare. And I think Heineke wasn't, you know, thinking about it, because now he's put himself under pressure. Now he has to balance, you know, winning and against, you know, some of these political pressures that he's under.
What does that put? You talked about the political pressure. How much political pressure now is it for those players of color within the team that you know have to now perform essentially? And what we've seen in recent run-up to those matches is that Heineke Meyer has played these players out of position. Does that make for a good reading for them, given the situation now with COSATU and what they've been put in?
Yeah, well, I think any black player that has played, you know, you realize that sometimes you get put into positions that aren't favorable. And I've got all the belief in some of the players that have been picked. For me, Rudy Page, I've been watching him for the past 4 years. His development straight from UJ. He's a very good talent of scrum half. Given the chance, I back him. I'm not worried that he'll falter. He's got a good kicking game. He's a great communicator, and so it goes on through all those players. So them being put under pressure, I'm not so worried. But it's just unfair on the whole, you know, on all the players, that they're not given a fair chance before they get put into, you know, the deep end, as it is the World Cup. I mean, you come up to a semi-final and you're going to ask a player like Rudy to come on once Fourie or Ruan has been injured. You know, it's very unfair.
Now, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Peter de Villiers, and he's been quite vocal in the week leading up to this, and you know, really going after Heineke Meyer. Your thoughts on his way of seeing things? Because we look at his side and we look at you know, the players that played in that last game for him. It didn't look very transformed to me.
Yes, I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, I've seen the numbers, people talking about Peter de Villiers, but I think that people are diverting their attention away from what the real problem is. You know, I think it's unfair that when Heineke Meyer is now Springbok coach, people are going back and pulling out the numbers of Peter de Villiers. But he's also not helping himself, is Peter de Villiers, by being caught up in this situation. But actually, I think that he's actually a very brave man to be vocal and to be able to stand his ground and talk about what he believes in. Because if we are honest with each other here, we can see that Peter de Villiers has been basically put outside as far as rugby is concerned here in South Africa. There are no opportunities for him anymore. He can't get a coaching job anywhere. He's tried to apply for jobs, but it seems like the doors are closed on purpose for Peter de Villiers. But he's continued to talk, and I think it takes a lot of courage for a man to do that, considering the circumstances here. But I think we need to also be realistic that under Peter de Villiers, the Boks were playing a different kind of rugby, you know. They're playing the kind of rugby that people were actually enjoying to see, you know. And we need to be honest that Peter de Villiers also got results. Because as much as we are focusing on transformation, Hanneke Meyer is also not getting the results, guys. And I think that's what we need to focus on, because Argentina finished ahead of South Africa in the Rugby Championship log, something that's never happened before, something that should be absolutely unacceptable if you are the Springbok coach. He's never won the Rugby Championship in his 4 years, you know, in charge of the Springboks. So I think we also need to look at things like that.
Now, obviously, we talked about the fact that Rudy Page has been selected, and we you know, there are those who are out, you know, with the hammer on someone like him. Is it fair to him? I mean, you select him now, and you know, it's almost like you're saying, "Come on, son, I'm selecting you. You got your one chance, and if you fail, you know, curtains is closed." And there's the, you know, it's almost like an escape route, if that's the way to put it.
I think, as I said earlier on when we started the show, that it's totally unfair, this criticism on a guy like Rudy Page, you know, because he doesn't pick himself. None of the 31 men in that squad picked themselves. They picked by the coach. And as Kennedy has said very well, that Rudy Page is a fantastic player, you know. I know that a guy like Vata Ngobeni rates him very highly, because Vata is always at the Bulls games, and he's seen what Rudy Page can do. And don't forget that Rudy Page was also the captain of the SA, I think the under-20s of the SA schools team, you know. So he's come through the system and is a good player. But we all know that Hanneke Meyer has never played him, and that's why it's a surprise that he's been picked ahead of guys like Kobus Reinach, ahead of guys like Faf de Klerk, and that's why it shows that it's a transformation as a selection. And I think that's where the coach has got it all wrong. I don't think he really understands what a transformation is all about and what it means. And I think that at this stage, at this critical stage where we are, where the team is going to the World Cup, Hanneke Meyer should have just stuck with his charges. If he wants Kobus Reinach in this team, he must go and back Kobus Reinach and pick him in the team and go with who he believes will win at the World Cup for him, and not crack under pressure, because it's too late now. It's World Cup time, and I think you need your best players at the World Cup. But I think that, as I said earlier on, when we talk transformation, we need to talk about the bigger picture here, because at the end of the day, the players are being lost somewhere in the system, and I think that's what we need to visit.
Tabiso, I'm going to put you on hold right there, because we do have a caller. Mike, you calling us. Give us your opinion on what you feel the Springbok setup looks like right now from a transformation perspective.
Hi. It's really ridiculous. Firstly, I'm a South African. I'm a black South African. I've never really supported the Springboks. The extreme irony is that more than 20 years after the new South Africa came into being, that I've got even less reason now to support the Springboks than I ever had in the past. But let me tell you what my problems are with the current situation. You know, my heart bleeds for a guy like Rudy Page. Any single person who knows Hanneke Meyer knows how conservative he is, and they know that he backs the people that he's always supported, the Victor Matfields of this world. He's brought Victor Matfield back out of retirement. He's got Fourie out of retirement, and he would have brought some other guys. Isn't anybody seeing the farce that this guy picks a guy that has never played a test for the Springboks to take him to the World Cup? That guy is going to carry bags. It is, you know, it defies belief that people can say, I don't care about the merits of how well this guy plays. It goes against the grain. It goes against anything that Hanneke Meyer has ever done. Then I also want to say, if people are saying that he has just met the transformation quota, you're talking absolute codswallop. Because how can you factor in a person who is going to his third or fourth World Cup as a transformation player? I'd like somebody to answer that. How does Brian Abana, who's going to his third or fourth World Cup, how does Mkau Arira, who's going to his second or third World Cup, how does J.P. Peterson, who's going to his second or third World Cup, still qualify as a transformation player? Hanneke Meyer and the current president of South African Rugby, Regan Hoskins, the entire country, and I'm speaking as a non-Springbok supporter, should be hung, drawn and quartered for having done this to this country that they profess they want to have, they want to see win the World Cup. Guys, this is a farce, and people should not allow Hanneke Meyer and Regan Hoskins get away with this. It's critical, it's criminal. I would say in sporting terms, This is criminal. It deserves life without parole. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mike. And obviously, he's got some heated questions there. So I'm going to toss to you there, Kennedy. Essentially, what Mike is talking there, he's referring to the fact that we are window dressing and sending in young players, firstly, that haven't been seasoned enough, and then sending in seasoned players that shouldn't be considered quota players or shouldn't be considered transformation players because they've already been there and they've already done the best at the highest level. Kennedy, are you there? Well, it seems we've lost Kennedy there, Tabiso, so I'm going to throw that question to you. Obviously, the viewer was very passionate there about what's happening in the country. Essentially, he talks about window dressing.
I think the sad reality of what was said by the caller, Mike, is that he represents the views of a lot of South Africans. You know, a lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of people that I've seen on social networks that I've heard on TV and radio stations feel exactly like the gentleman that has called here today. You know, they do not support the Springboks because of this, and you can understand where he's coming from. You know, we spoke about it earlier that for Damian Dealende to be considered as a player of color, it throws it back at our face. You know, it's really an insult to South Africa and to South African rugby. And I think he raises some very, very valuable points because there are so many guys in that team that have proved themselves that should be actually be moved away from this transformation talk that should not be labeled, you know, that should be regarded as top players. But as I said earlier on, the coach has basically left this up until too late. And let's also not forget that, as he said, I mean, if you look at the Springbok teams that have been lining up, Tendai Mtawarira is the only black player that basically starts in that team. And Tendai Mtawarira is Zimbabwean, you know, he's from Zimbabwe, and then obviously he came to the country. So I think the reason that people feel like Mike is because the Springboks, when you see them lining up and singing the national anthem, they don't look like they represent South Africa. They actually make us look like we are two different countries here because the majority of this country is black. But when you look at the Springbok team, it's only one black African player. But as far as the numbers is concerned of how black players are classified, it actually goes back to SARU's policy. It goes back to what they have, those documents in black and white, that those, when they say 9 players of color, they actually include coloureds, Indians, and black Africans, you know. So that's what the transformation, that's what these nine players are all about. That's what is being spoken about. But the sad reality here is that Heineke Meyer has just met the nine. Which should...
Of which the gentleman alluded to the fact that, you know, a few of them have actually been to the World Cup already. So
yes.
How is that development? These are players that are world leaders in their particular roles.
Now, for me, that problem is filtering down the system now because at the recent Craven Week tournament, which was held in Stellenbosch, there was an unwritten rule for the provinces that they should have 9 players of color in their squads. And I think it was only Western Province and the Eastern Province that actually had more than 9. Everybody else just had 9, so they just did enough to meet the numbers. And guess who was in the final of the Currie Cup final? Western Province thrashing Eastern Province by 95 points to 0, you know. And the gentleman also spoke about the kind of rugby that Rudy Page plays, you know, that is totally against what Heineke Meyer believes in, which is correct, because we know that Heineke Meyer believes in that Blue Bulls kind of rugby. This is actually, it's not even about racism anymore, you know, it's that Blue Bulls mentality. Because we must also understand that Heineke Meyer is the first Afrikaner to coach the Springboks in 8 years. So that mentality will be with him. That's why he will go with a guy like Andre Pollard ahead of Pat Lambi.
Well, Tabiso, I want to come back to you on that. I believe we do have a caller. Who am I talking to, and what is your thoughts on the current transformation topic?
Hello, this is Tabiso speaking.
Hi. Tell me, sir, what is your standpoint on the current transformation issue in the country? Do you think it's warranted that people are getting up in arms about what's happening right now with the players that have been selected for the World Cup?
No, I think that Heineke Meyer has selected the best squad that will lead us to win this World Cup. So yeah, I think the best squad, the 9 black people, is good, and he should select the squad that he think it is the best for it to win the World Cup.
Well, there you have it. Here's a fan talking to us about his opinion. But before we head off to back to Kennedy, we're going to go to my buddy Len Moleko. He's obviously now on the touch screen. He's going to give us a little bit of an insight into the since 2007 till 2011 until now, and really touch a little bit more on the transformation issue. Len, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Pashka. There's a point that you and Tabiso were making over there with regards to the transformation, the numbers that we have, saying that Hanneke Meyer has only managed to make the 9. Now, it's going to be very interesting if you look at the picture from 2007 until you look at the picture now in 2015. Now, starting in 2007, obviously that was a year the Boks were victorious. They won the World Cup against France England rather, in the final. If you look at the number of players, obviously you had the likes of your Osdurant, John Smith, CJ van der Linde, Bakkies Botha, obviously in terms of your backlines, and you had other players. But one thing that stood out was when the team was taken over for the World Cup, there was a total of 6 players of color. And out of those 6 players of color, only 2 of them managed to represent South Africa in the final in a game which they won. And you'll be very surprised in terms of one of the callers, in terms of what he said, and the picture that you're going to be seeing now. Those 2 players during the 2007 World Cups were Brian Habana and JP Peterson. Now, jumping 2007 to 2011, where we went over to New Zealand, and unfortunately for Peter de Villiers, he was not able to bring the trophy home or defend the trophy. If you look at the picture of the Springbok team back in 2011, you will see something else that's very similar to 2007. The likes of your John Smith was in the team again, Yanni du Plessis, Danny Rousseau. You go through the list, the likes of your Skalk Burgers were in the team, the likes of your Brian Habanas were in the team, Pierre Spies, Henrik Brousseau, Victor Medfield as well. But there's another thing that stands out when it comes to those players of color who were representing South Africa. And it's those 2 players again that we mentioned earlier from 2007, JP Peterson and Brian Habana. And to this list, you'll obviously add Guthrie Steenkamp. Now, what's different from 2007, 2011, and 2015? Not much, because you still have Brian Habana as a player of color. You still have JP Peterson as a player of color. And the likelihood is that both of them will probably be in Hanneke Meyer starting 15 for that first game against Japan. Now, you ask yourself, the likes of your Rudy Pages, the Trevor Nyakanis, are they going to make the squad, or are they just going there to represent the numbers? Are they just there because they form part of the 9? You ask yourself, a veteran like Mone Steyn, couldn't Hanneke Meyer have gone with an option like Elton Yankees? I mean, Elton has not been given a fair chance. I think Andre Pollard has been given more of a fair chance than Elton Yankees, because both of them have had their bad games. But it seems like Andre Pollard, who just happens to be a product of the Blue Bulls rugby setup, just happens to get more of a chance than Elton Yankees. So you ask yourself, have we transformed? I don't think so. I think this transformation that happened now with the number of players that have been sent, those of color, it was done in haste. It was done because 9 players had to be fitted into the team. In 2007, we had 6 players of color. In 2011, we had 8. And now, in 2015, we have 9. And in terms of the starters, we had 2 in 2007. We had 3 in 2011. And the likelihood is that we're going to have 4 or 5 in 2015. Has the change happened? No, I don't think it has. And I think we have a very long way to go, because transformation starts from the grassroots level, and that is where our rugby is not actually developing that talent.
Well, thank you very much for that, Len. We've got a caller now that's called in. Who am I talking to, and what's your opinion on the hotly debated topic?
Yeah, we are talking to Bongachek. I have the comment that it's not used to put more black people, but they're not going to play on the squad. It's still like it's not a transformation to us. We want to see more colored people, more black people to play, to see them playing on the rugby.
I'm going to toss next to you, and the gentleman sharing the sentiment there of that he wants to see a more transformed team, a team that represents him. How do we get to that? It seems we've lost Kennedy again. So Tabiso, looks like I'm going to have to come back to you. Tabiso, how do we get to that? What's the next step for us?
How we get to that is by going back to the bottom and find out where we are losing these kids, you know, because these kids have been playing Craven Week rugby for years, the black players. Now, we've seen lots of them playing fly half, playing all the different positions that they say black players can't play. But once they leave school and they start going under 19, under 20 level to the provincial level, that's where we are losing the kids for me. And I think it's a big worry, not only in rugby, but also in cricket, because you must understand that a black player has more things to worry about outside the field than probably his white counterpart, you know. If a guy sees that in his first year after leaving high school, he can't make the province's first team, then the guy's going to go look for a job because he's got 5 members of his family that he must support, and he's the breadwinner, you know. So those are the challenges that we face, and I think then that's when we need to look at the coaching system of South African rugby, because that has not transformed. If you look at almost all the coaches in the provinces and the unions, those coaches are white. If you look at the coaches in the junior structures, also those coaches are white. Now, if a white coach is faced with the situation of having a black player and a white player, is obviously going to try, of the same ability, he's probably going to try back the white player because he knows which buttons to press out of the white player. He doesn't know the challenges that the black player faces, you know, and so he'll go for the white player. So I think that's also where we need to look as far as transformation is concerned, because the coaches are not backing the players once they leave high school, and that's where the players are getting lost in the system. Coaching needs to be transformed here in South African rugby also.
Well, Tabiso, I believe we do have Kennedy back on the Skype. Kennedy, your thoughts on what needs to be done as well? Tabiso has aired his views. What's your thoughts?
Yes, I desperately think that after school, it needs to be addressed that school leavers be monitored, because there's too many that are falling away. And a lot of them are being brought out from wherever their homes are, and being taken to these strong schools. And after they finish school, they don't take care of them. There's no mentorship, nothing of that in place, and that's what happens. Is why our numbers keep dwindling down. So we're looking at the past years to see an improvement, but we won't be able to see an improvement because there's just no monitoring, and there's a lot of talk, a lot of money being spent, but there's just not any evidence that follows through. And it happens that every time once we get to a World Cup, this problem arises, and it happened in 2007, and it continues to happen.
Laziness on Saru's behalf, the fact that they tend to go to probably about 50 schools in the country, is it a laziness on their behalf that they don't develop the game beyond those borders?
Yes, they need to address it, because I mean,
can you hear me?
They watch, you know. This is under their mandates and under their policies to make sure that the game is, fully, the scope of the game is. Yes, I can hear you. Hello?
Hi, Kennedy. You carry on?
Yes, I was just saying that they need to make sure that they address, because everyone looks to them to lead by example. But it's very difficult if they are trying. Yes, I can hear you.
To be having a problem there with Kennedy. Kennedy, thank you for calling in. But we do now have Roy on the line. Roy, what's your thoughts on the hotly debated issue?
How are you, sir?
Fine, and you, Roy? What's your opinion on the hotly debated issue?
Member, how's it? Sorry, man. I just want to say, man, I'm not sure, man. I feel pity for Hanneke Meyer on this situation. My problem is, I think this is an opportunity that we can use to actually snip the bud on this problem, because I see this guy, the problem here is not the color of the players he's chosen, but is the type of players he was choosing, some out of form, some from injury. But I think the main problem, the guys who are sponsoring, the sponsors who are giving the rugby guys money, they are behind all these things. Once we see change from those guys, the sponsors, I think we can start there and move forward, because those guys are under pressure. Tabiso just mentioned the guys, the coaches on the lower levels. They are not allowed to choose those players because they are given money, and that money actually directs them on what to do. So if we can snap it there, I think we can go forward.
Well, thank you for that call, and thank you to my guests, Tabiso and Kennedy. It's been an engaging half hour, and we'll hopefully have more positive vibes heading into the World Cup with more proper black representation in the teams. But from the Game On team and the team at the sports desk, for that matter, thank you and goodbye.